Jake Thornton had been working this godforsaken stretch of Wyoming ranchland for going on 30 years now, and he figured he'd seen just about everything Mother Nature could throw at him. Dead cattle, coyotes picking at carcasses, the occasional rattler sunning itself on a rock. Yeah, he dealt with it all. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared him for what went down that Tuesday evening in late August. The sun was already starting to dip below the horizon, painting the sky all kinds of orange and purple, when Jake was out riding the fence line on the North 40. His horse, an old mare named Bess who'd been with him through thick and thin, suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. Just froze up like she'd hit an invisible wall or something. "Come on now, girl," Jake muttered, giving her a little nudge with his heels. "Ain't got all night here." But Bess wasn't having it. Her ears were perked straight up, swiveling like satellite dishes trying to lock onto a signal. That's when Jake heard it too real faint-like, barely louder than the wind rustling through the sagebrush. Sounded almost like a wounded animal, maybe a kitten or something. Jake swung down from the saddle, his knees popping like firecrackers the way they always did these days. Getting old was a real pain in the butt. He grabbed his flashlight from the saddlebag and started picking his way through the scrub brush toward that pathetic little sound. That's when he spotted it, a dirty burlap sack. The kind you'd use for feed or potatoes, just lying there by the dried-up creek bed like somebody's trash. The thing was tied shut with twine, and Jake's gut immediately told him something was seriously wrong here. Then he heard it, clear as day, even though it was barely a whisper. "Mama." Jake's blood ran cold. His hands were shaking as he whipped out his pocket knife and started sawing at that twine like his life depended on it. When he finally got the sack open and shined his light inside, he just about lost it. There was a baby in there. A tiny little girl, couldn't have been more than a year and a half old, curled up like she was trying to make herself disappear. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her skin was hot to the touch, and her eyes, man, those eyes just about broke him. They were glassy and unfocused, barely registering that someone had found her. "Sweet Jesus," Jake breathed, his voice cracking. He'd seen some messed up stuff in his day, but this was pure evil. He scooped that baby up real gentle-like, even though his instinct was screaming at him to move faster. She weighed next to nothing, like picking up a bag of feathers. Her little head lolled against his chest, and he could feel her heart beating way too fast, like a bird trapped in a cage. "I got you, sweetheart," he said, even though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "You're gonna be all right now. Old Jake's got you." He wrapped her up in his denim jacket and climbed back on Bess faster than he'd moved in years. The nearest hospital was a good 40 miles away in Ridgeway, and he didn't have time to mess around, calling an ambulance and waiting God knows how long for them to show up. As Bess took off at a gallop, something she probably hadn't done since she was a filly Jake held that baby tight against his chest. Every few seconds, she'd let out another one of those heartbreaking little whispers. "Mama, Mama." "I know, baby girl," Jake said, his eyes stinging with tears he hadn't cried in decades. "I know you want your mama. But right now, you got me, and I swear on everything holy, I ain't gonna let nothing happen to you." The wind whipped past them as they raced toward town, and Jake couldn't shake one terrible thought. How close had he come to never hearing that whisper at all? Jake didn't remember much about that 40-mile ride except the sound of Bess's hooves pounding dirt and asphalt, and that baby's raspy breathing against his chest. He'd pushed that old mare harder than he had any right to, and bless her heart, she delivered. By the time they hit the outskirts of Ridgeway, Bess was lathered up something fierce. But they'd made it in record time. He ditched the horse right there in the hospital parking lot, just slid off and left her standing by the year entrance, reins dragging. Someone would deal with it. Right now, he had bigger fish to fry. "I need help," Jake hollered, bursting through those automatic doors like a man possessed. "Got a baby here. She's in real bad shape." The ES staff went into full-on crisis mode. Nurses came running from every direction, and before Jake could blink twice, they'd whisked that little girl out of his arms and onto a gurney. A doctor, young guy, couldn't have been older than 35, started barking orders like a drill sergeant. "Get me a pediatric 4 kit, stat. I need vitals, and someone call up to ICU, we're gonna need a bed." Jake stood there like a useless bump on a log, his jacket still warm from where the baby had been. His hands were shaking so bad he had to shove them in his pockets. A nurse with kind eyes and graying hair touched his arm. "Sir, you did good getting her here. Now we need some information. What's her name? Do you know her parents?" I don't know nothing," Jake stammered, feeling like a complete idiot. "Found her out on my property, dumped in a feed sack like garbage. She kept saying mama, but that's all I got." The nurse's face went pale. "Someone just left her?" "Yeah, tied up in a burlap sack by the old creek bed." Jake's voice came out harder than he meant it to. "What kind of sick son of a—" he caught himself, remembering where he was. "Okay, honey, you just sit tight," the nurse said, already reaching for a phone. "I'm calling Sheriff Davis. You're gonna need to talk to him." The next few hours were pure torture. Jake paced that waiting room like a caged animal, wearing a path in the linoleum. Other folks came and went, a kid with a busted arm, some old-timer having chest pains, but Jake couldn't focus on any of it. All he could think about was that baby girl fighting for her life behind those swinging doors. Sheriff Bobby Davis showed up around 9 o'clock, hat in hand, looking grim as death. Bobby was good people. They'd gone to high school together about 1,000,000 years ago. "Jake," Bobby said, settling his considerable bulk into the chair next to him. "Heard you had quite an evening." "That's putting it mildly, Bobby." Jake walked him through the whole thing, finding the sack, hearing that whisper, the desperate ride into town. Bobby took notes, his jaw getting tighter with every detail. "I already got deputies out at your place, looking for evidence," Bobby said. "But Jake, I gotta be straight with you, whoever done this probably didn't leave us much to work with. No tire tracks in that area? Ground's hard as concrete this time of year. Hasn't rained in weeks. Yeah, that's what I figured." Bobby rubbed his face, looking about 100 years old. "We'll check missing persons reports, see if anyone's reported a kid gone. But between you and me, people who do this kind of thing usually aren't the reporting type, if you catch my drift." Around midnight, the young doctor finally came out, scrub splattered with who knows what. Looking beat. "She's stable," he said. And Jake felt his knees nearly buckle with relief. Severe dehydration, exposure, some minor scrapes and bruises. Another few hours out there. He didn't finish, but he didn't have to. "Can I see her?" Jake asked. The doctor nodded. "Room 304, but just for a minute, she needs rest." Jake found her hooked up to more tubes and wires than seemed possible for someone so small. But her chest was rising and falling steady-like, and that was all that mattered. "You're a fighter, aren't you?" he whispered. Jake became a regular fixture at Ridgeway General over the next few weeks, showing up every morning like clockwork. The nurses started joking that they ought to just give him his own parking spot and a time card. He'd roll in around 8, smelling like horse and hay, carrying whatever he thought might help stuffed animals from the Walmart, little books with pictures, sometimes just a cup of coffee and his weathered presence. The baby, who the staff had started calling Hope because, well, what else were they going to call her, was making one heck of a comeback. "Kids are resilient like that," the doctor said. "Tougher than old boot leather when they need to be dot at first." Hope was scared of pretty much everyone. Can't say Jake blamed her after what she'd been through. She'd flinch when people got too close, and her eyes had this haunted look that no kid should ever have. But something about Jake seemed to calm her down. Maybe it was his gravelly voice or the fact that he never tried too hard. He'd just sit in that uncomfortable hospital chair and talk to her about nothing, the weather, what Bess was up to, how the fence line was holding up. You know, "Little darlin'," he'd say, "that old Murray of mine's been asking about you. Thinks you something special, and Bess is a pretty good judge of character." By week 3, Hope was pulling herself up on the crib rails when Jake walked in, reaching those chubby little arms out toward him. First time she did that, Jake had to excuse himself and go stand in the hallway for a minute, getting all choked up like some kind of SOFTY. The thing was, Jake hadn't been around kids in, well, forever. He and his wife Ellen had been expecting, way back when had the nursery all painted yellow, crib put together, the whole 9 yards. But Ellen had complications during the pregnancy. Lost the baby at 7 months, and the grief of it just ate her up inside. Cancer got her 2 years later, and Jake always figured she'd just given up fighting. After that, he'd buried himself in ranch work and figured his chance at being a dad had come and gone. Now here he was, damn near 63 years old, learning how to change diapers and making ridiculous faces to get a traumatized toddler to smile. The social worker, a no-nonsense lady named Patricia Chun, cornered him one afternoon in the cafeteria. "Mr. Thornton, we need to discuss Hope's placement," she said, getting right to business. "She's being discharged next week, and we've got a foster family lined up in Cheyenne." No. The word came out before Jake could stop himself. Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? I mean..." Jake set down his coffee, trying to figure out what the heck he was even saying. "What would it take for me to foster her? Temporarily, you know. Just until you find her people or whatever." Patricia looked at him like he'd just sprouted a second head. "Mr. Thornton, you're a single man in your 60s living alone on a remote ranch. The state requires I got a steady income. House is paid off. I can pass whatever background checks you need." Jake leaned forward, surprised by how desperate he sounded. "Look, I know I ain't exactly ideal here, but that little girl knows me, trusts me. You really want to rip her away from the only stable thing she's got right now and stick her with strangers in some city?" Patricia was quiet for a long minute, tapping her pen against her notepad. "You'd need to complete foster parent training, home inspection, references, and there's no guarantee. I'll do whatever it takes." 2 months later, after more paperwork than Jake thought existed in the entire world, Hope came home to the ranch. She toddled around the house like she owned the place, chattering away in that half-English, half-gibberish way toddlers do. That first night, when Jake tucked her into the crib he'd bought yellow, just like the one from all those years ago, she looked up at him with those big brown eyes and said, "Dada." Jake's heart just about exploded right there in his chest. "Yeah, sweetheart," he whispered, voice cracking. "I guess I am." Sheriff Bobby Davis wasn't the type to let a case go cold, especially one that involved a kid getting dumped like trash. He'd been grinding away at this thing for months, chasing down dead-end leads and coming up empty more times than he cared to admit. But Bobby was stubborn as a mule with a toothache, and he wasn't about to quit. It was a Tuesday morning in late November when things finally started to crack open. Bobby was nursing his 3rd cup of station coffee, which tasted like motor oil mixed with regret, when his deputy, Martinez, came hustling and looking excited. "Boss, I think I got something." Martinez dropped a missing persons report on Bobby's desk, dated about 3 days before Jake found Hope. Sarah Mitchell, 24 years old. Last seen in Copper Falls, a dingy little town about 60 miles east of where the baby was found. And get this, the report mentioned she had a toddler daughter with her. "Now we're cooking with gas," Bobby muttered, scanning the details. The report had been filed by Sarah's aunt, who said it wasn't like Sarah to just vanish without a word. Said she'd been worried about her niece for months, ever since Sarah had gotten mixed up with some low-life boyfriend. Bobby and Martinez made the drive to Copper Falls that same afternoon. The aunt, Dorothy Mitchell, lived in a trailer park on the sketchy side of town. She was a tough old bird with a smoker's rasp and eyes that had seen too much. "I knew something bad was going to happen," Dorothy said, chain-smoking at her kitchen table. "That boyfriend of hers, Tyler Crow, he's pure poison. Started out all sweet and charming, you know how they do. But then he got mean. Real mean." She showed them photos of Sarah, a thin blonde girl with tired eyes and a sad smile, holding a chubby-cheeked baby who looked exactly like Hope. "That's her daughter, Emma," Dorothy said, her voice breaking. "Sweet little thing. Is she... Did you find her?" Bobby exchanged a look with Martinez. "Ma'am, we might have. She's safe now, if it's her." Dorothy broke down crying, and it took her a minute to pull herself together. When she did, she spilled everything she knew about Tyler Crow. The guy was bad news with a capital B, had priors for assault, domestic violence, drug possession. He'd isolated Sarah from her family, controlled every aspect of her life. "Last time I saw Sarah, she had a black eye and bruises on her arms," Dorothy said. "I begged her to leave him, but she was terrified. Said Tyler told her if she tried to run, he'd kill her and the baby both." Bobby got a warrant and pulled security footage from every gas station and convenience store between Copper Falls and Jake's Ranch. It took days of squinting at grainy videos, but they finally hit pay dirt at a Shell station about 15 miles from where Hope was found. There she was, Sarah Mitchell, looking scared out of her mind, with a little girl matching Hope's description. But she wasn't alone. A guy was with her, tall and mean-looking, with tattoos crawling up his neck. He was gripping Sarah's arm hard enough to leave marks, and you could see her flinching every time he moved. The timestamp read 6:47 p.m., roughly 2 hours before Jake found the baby. "That's gotta be Crow," Martinez said. Bobby watched the footage over and over. You could see Tyler pointing toward the car, Sarah shaking her head, then Tyler getting in her face. The body language was all wrong. This wasn't a couple having a disagreement. This was a predator controlling his prey. "Put out an PB on both of them," Bobby ordered. "Sarah Mitchell and Tyler Crow. Consider Crow armed and dangerous." But it was like they'd vanished into thin air. Tyler's apartment in Copper Falls was cleared out. Sarah's phone was dead. Nobody had seen hide nor hair of either of them. Bobby drove out to Jake's ranch that evening to fill him in. Jake was giving Hope her dinner mashed sweet potatoes that were ending up more on her face than in her mouth. "Her real name's Emma," Bobby said. "Emma Mitchell." Jake looked down at the little girl who'd become his whole world, and his jaw tightened. "Her mama's out there somewhere," Bobby continued. "And so is the bastard who made her do this." "You'll find them," Jake said quietly. "You have to." 6 months had gone by since Hope or Emma, though Jake still mostly called her Hope, had come to live at the ranch. It was a Saturday afternoon in early May, and Jake was out back teaching her how to feed carrots to Bess. The kid was absolutely fearless around animals, which made Jake's heart swell up like a balloon. "Gotta keep your hand flat, darlin'," he was saying, demonstrating for the 100th time. "Otherwise Bess might accidentally get your fingers, and we need those for." He stopped mid-sentence when he spotted someone standing at the edge of the driveway. A woman, thin as a rail, wearing a hoodie despite the warm weather. Something about the way she was standing there, all hunched over like she was trying to disappear, set off alarm bells in Jake's head. "Stay right here with Bess," he told Hope, then walked toward the stranger. one hand instinctively moving toward the ranch rifle he kept by the door. As he got closer, the woman pulled back her hood and Jake's stomach dropped. Even half-starved and looking like she'd been through hell. He recognized her from the photos Bobby had shown him. Sarah Mitchell. "Please don't call the cops," she said, voice shaking like a leaf in a windstorm. I needed to see her. To know she's okay." Jake's first instinct was to tell her to get lost. This was the woman who'd abandoned hope in a feed sack to die. But something about the terror in her eyes made him pause. This wasn't some heartless monster. This was a scared kid who looked barely alive herself. "You better come inside," he said gruffly. "And yeah, I'm calling Bobby, but I'll hear you out first." They sat at the kitchen table while Hope played in the living room, oblivious. Sarah couldn't stop staring toward the sound of the little girl's babbling, tears streaming down her face. Is she happy?" Sarah whispered. "She's doing just fine, no thanks to you," Jake said, harsher than he meant to. "Now you gonna tell me what the hell happened, or are we gonna dance around it?" Sarah took a shaky breath and it all came pouring out. The whole ugly story about Tyler Crow, how he'd started out sweet, then turned into a nightmare. How he'd cut her off from everyone, monitored her phone, beat her for looking at other men wrong. How she'd tried to leave twice and he'd found her both times, and the second time he'd put her in the hospital. "He said if I tried again, he'd kill Emma," Sarah said, voice breaking. He meant it too. I could see it in his eyes. He was getting worse using more, getting paranoid. Started saying Emma cried too much, that she was a burden. That day at the gas station, Tyler had made his move. Told Sarah they were getting rid of the brat one way or another. Either Sarah did it his way, or he'd do it his way, and his way would be a whole lot worse. "He had a gun," Sarah sobbed. "He said if I didn't leave her somewhere she'd be found, he'd shoot her and dump her in the reservoir. He made me tie the sack, made me put her by that creek. Sod ranchers always check their fence lines, that someone would find her before." She couldn't finish. Jake felt sick to his stomach. "So I did it," Sarah continued, her voice hollow. "I left my baby girl in that sack and I drove away with him. I thought at least she'd have a chance. At least she'd be away from him. Where's Tyler now?" Jake asked. "I don't know. I finally got away from him 3 weeks ago, hitched a ride to Denver, been living in a shelter. But I had to come back. Had to see her." She looked at Jake with desperate eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I can't even forgive myself. But I need to know. Can I see her? Just for a minute?" Jake was quiet for a long time, wrestling with emotions he didn't know he had. "Bobby's on his way," he finally said, softer now. "But yeah, you can see her." When Sarah saw Emma toddling around, healthy and giggling, she collapsed on the floor, sobbing. And Jake realized something. This wasn't about right or wrong anymore. This was about figuring out how to put broken pieces back together. Even when some of them didn't fit quite right. Bobby showed up about 20 minutes later with Martinez's riding shotgun, and Jake had to give the sheriff credit. He didn't come in guns blazing or slap the cuffs on Sarah right away. He just sat down at the kitchen table, took off his hat, and listened while she told her story all over again, filling in every painful detail. "Tyler's still out there," Sarah said, wrapping her arms around herself like she was freezing. "I'm terrified he's gonna find me." "Find her? Not if I find him first," Bobby said, his voice hard as granite. "We've had eyes out for him for months. Now that we know he's running solo, it's only a matter of time." And Bobby wasn't blowing smoke. 2 weeks later, they nabbed Tyler Crow at a Fleabag motel outside Casper, high as a kite and dumb enough to use his real credit card. He went down for a laundry list of charges: kidnapping, child endangerment, domestic assault, parole violation. The Day said he was looking at 20 years minimum, maybe more if they really threw the book at him. Sarah, on the other hand, was in a whole different kind of bind. Legally speaking, she'd abandoned her kid, even if it was under duress. The county prosecutor hemmed and hawed about pressing charges, but ultimately decided that putting a domestic violence victim in prison wasn't going to help anybody. Instead, they worked out a deal: mandatory counseling, a restraining order against Tyler, and supervised visitation with Emma while she got her life together. Jake watched all this unfold from the sidelines, holding hope, Emma whatever her name was supposed to be. The kid had gotten attached to him something fierce, calling him Papa Jake now and crying whenever he left the room. Social services was making noises about reunification, about getting Sarah stable enough to take her daughter back, and that's what kept Jake up at night, staring at the ceiling and feeling like his heart was getting ripped out of his chest all over again. Sarah moved into Dorothy's place and started doing the work therapy 3 times a week. Job training at the community college, showing up for every single supervised visit like her life depended on it. Jake had to hand it to her. She was trying. Really trying. One evening, about 4 months after Sarah had shown up at the ranch, she and Jake met at a diner in town without the social workers or lawyers breathing down their necks. Just 2 people trying to figure out what the hell to do. "She loves you," Sarah said quietly, stirring her coffee with a shaky hand. "I can see it. The way she lights up when you walk in the room." "She's a special kid," Jake said, his throat tight. "I want to be her mom," Sarah continued. "God, I want that more than anything. But I'm a mess, Jake. I'm working on it, but I don't know if I'll ever be what she needs. And even if I get there, how do I take her away from the only stable home she's ever known?" They sat there in silence for a while, the weight of it crushing them both. "What if?" Sarah started, then stopped. "Tried again. What if we did this different? What if you adopted her, made it legal and everything, and I could still be in her life? Like an aunt or something, until I'm really ready. If I ever am." Jake felt something crack open in his chest. "You'd be okay with that?" "I want what's best for her," Sarah said, tears rolling down her face. "And right now?" "That's you. That's the life you can give her. But maybe someday, when I've got my act together, we could, I don't know, figure it out as we go?" The adoption went through that fall. Judge Murphy, who'd known Jake since Dirt was young, signed the papers with a smile and told him he was doing a good thing. Sarah kept her promise, stayed in therapy, got a job at a veterinary clinic, visited Emma twice a month. Some visits were harder than others, but she showed up. Always showed up. And Jake? He became a dad at 63, complete with diaper bags and bedtime stories and a little girl who thought he hung the moon. That whisper he'd heard in a burlap sack hadn't just saved Emma's life. It had saved his too, giving him a second chance at something he thought he'd lost forever, a family. Some endings aren't perfect, but sometimes they're exactly what everybody needs.